Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. And today we're going to be discussing a very important topic that's going around the world, and that deals with the war in Ukraine, which is subject of a show that we actually have run twice a week on the network. We're going to also discuss NATO, but right now I'm going to bring in the panelists, then I'll bring in the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. First of all, on the panel, we have hailing from Dhaka, Bangladesh, is Dr. Sharif. Dr. Sharif, welcome to a very important topic panel discussion regarding NATO and, of course, the Ukraine. Also on our panel, we have from Washington, D.C., we have Dr. John Lockwood, who is is actually an expert in U.S.-USSR relationships out of Washington, D.C. Then, of course, the host of Russia, China, Ukraine, we bring in Sasha Starr, who is originally from the Ukraine, Odessa, Ukraine. Then from Australia, we bring in Shaquille Latmer from Down Under, who's also the president of the Pacific Rim Council. And then in the United States of America, we have Kimberly Calhoun, who's also the president of the Pod TV network. And then, of course, from Washington, D.C., we have the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States of America, to discuss and highlight his view on this very important topic, which deals with NATO and the Ukraine. So, David, I'm going to start with you because I don't know what your time frame is. Frankly, I don't even know what city you're in right now. What are your thoughts about NATO and Ukraine?
First, I'm in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Okay, I've been there.
Ground zero for politics. And at 5:15 this evening Eastern Time, No Labels, of which I'm one of the national co-founders, will unveil its common sense agenda for America, and it will lay out its position on 30 issues of concern to the American people and a proposed way forward. And I encourage you to take a look at it. It's either going to be on C-SPAN Live or it's going to be at nolabels.org live. And so I'm here for that. But let me talk about the subject today. As you know, Ukraine is at war. Under the charter of NATO, no country who is at war can join NATO. I think there is broad-based agreement that once the conflict is over, then a pathway for admission for Ukraine to NATO is appropriate. But I use the words broad-based agreement. It has to be unanimous. And it is not yet clear whether every country, including some countries who I won't mention, who have been problematic at times in the past, will agree to that. Secondly, it's also not clear when and how the Ukraine conflict is going to end. So how long it might be before they can even be considered for membership. Now, here's what's interesting. This weekend on one of the major national news programs, political news programs, Mike Fitzpatrick, who is a Republican in Pennsylvania, a former FBI agent, co-chair of the Problem Solvers Conference, which is supported by No Labels, suggested that maybe a way forward might be to accelerate NATO membership for Ukraine with an express exclusion from Article 5. And Article 5, as you know, says an attack on one country is to be on every country. So his idea is that maybe we move faster to admit Ukraine to NATO if there can be unanimity on that point, with the express exclusion of Article 5 unless and until this conflict is over. So, whether or not that's viable or not, I don't know. But under the current charter, if you're at war, you're not eligible for membership to NATO. And Ukraine also wants to become a member of the European Union and the economic zone. And Putin has already said publicly that he doesn't have a problem with that. But his red line allegedly is NATO membership. So those are just a few opening remarks. I look forward to hearing what others have to say. I'll stay with you as long as I can, but I can't stay with you for the full hour.
Okay,
Can I just ask you a quick question on that, Dave? Just in relation to NATO membership, and you said that it has to be unanimous with all the members.
Right.
Is there any influence exerted by allies? So, for example, Australia is clearly not a member of NATO, but we're a very close ally of NATO. Do those other countries, I think Japan is another one, do those countries have any say or influence over how NATO makes its decisions, or are they just basically on the sidelines, or what's the process there?
Officially, no. Practically, but the real issue is there are certain countries in the past, one of which is Turkey, one of which is Hungary, but they're not the only ones. So the real question is that, can you get unanimity even along the ways that Representative Fitzpatrick suggested, which is let's put them on a faster track with an exclusion of Article 5. But again, at some point in time, I think one of the things we're going to want to talk about is how's this conflict going to end?
And just on the European Union issue, we know that Nigel Farage, for example, has lambasted the EU Parliament for poking the bear, is what he said in relation to EU membership of the Ukraine. I wasn't aware that Putin said that he had no problem with that. Is there a part of the Ukraine, the impression I had, is there a part of eastern Ukraine that doesn't want to be part of the EU? Is that part of this conflict, or is that sort of been resolved, or what's your general impressions of the situation?
Well, first, Ukraine is one country, despite the assertions of Putin. Putin does not recognize Ukraine as a separate country. In particular, he recognizes certain eastern parts of Ukraine and the portions that connect to Crimea are more Russian-oriented than Ukrainian-oriented. And as you probably recall from one of our prior shows, my personal view is that what Putin was trying to do at the beginning of this conflict, he was trying to annex part of eastern Ukraine, create a land bridge to Crimea, topple the government in Kyiv, put in a more friendly government, but not take over the whole country, so therefore he would have a buffer to NATO. I've never felt for a nanosecond that Putin had any intention to invade a NATO country. After his experience in Ukraine, we can see that the vaulted Russian military is nothing like they claimed it to be. So, but the real question is, how's it going to end now? And my concern is, for lots of reasons, and I've said this for over a year, that it may end up like Korea, where there's an armistice, where both sides stop the fighting. Ukraine doesn't agree to give up any territory, but Russia doesn't agree to leave any territory, and you have an effective state.
Yeah, I want to bring in Professor John Lockwood, who's a former U.S. military intelligence, to get his thoughts on NATO and Ukraine from Washington, D.C. John, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, interestingly enough, Nick, I agree with Dave Walker on how the conflict has to end, because NATO is confronted with two nations, Ukraine and Russia, who have politically irreconcilable objectives. Putin will not yield on his position that Ukraine is part of Russia and does not recognize it as a nation. Ukraine will not accept anything less than complete independence from Russia and from having Russia expelled from its territories, recovering the Crimea and expelling them from all the border areas that Russia occupied. Because we cannot conclude a formal treaty between the two countries, because any treaty that rewards Russia in any way, shape, manner, or form for its unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, this kind of treaty cannot be considered a treaty of peace. It is a treaty of appeasement and would set the stage for any future aggressions by Russia against Ukraine or other portions of NATO. I would disagree on that point with Dave. It would encourage future aggression. The only path forward, and it's a narrow one, would be for Ukraine to achieve operational victory against Russia by expelling them from the Crimea and expelling them from all the border regions, and it will decide that will set at least the minimum standard for a ceasefire, theater-wide ceasefire and armistice. Again, as Dave said, similar to the situation in Korea, not a perfect solution, but the only one that we can realistically achieve in the near to intermediate term.
Okay.
Nick,
We're going
Nick,
to
let me jump back in for a second.
bring in.
Let's go back to 2014. In 2014, Russia took control of Crimea. Despite the existence of the Budapest Agreement, where the UK, the US, and Russia agreed to provide security to Ukraine if they gave up their nuclear weapons. Obviously, Russia didn't honor that. It took control of Crimea, and the US and the UK did nothing. So this situation really started back then. And, you know, that's just another example of documents that aren't formal treaties really don't mean very much.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to go now to Dhaka, Bangladesh, and see what Dr. Sharif has to say regarding this issue, because it does affect people around the world, and I'm sure it affects the people in Dhaka as well. What are your thoughts about the Ukraine situation with Russia, Dr. Sharif?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. First, I would like to give thanks to Professor Nick Palveda, Madam Kinvarley, to inviting me in this forum. This is very important, and for me, Professor Dave, like a mentor, I can learn a lot of things from his LinkedIn profiles and on many interesting things I'm learning for developing the economic activities. I just want to share one thing because I have to work with the grassroots people around. Hello.
Go ahead.
I have to work with the South Asia and Asia Pacific region, and specifically, I have to work with the grassroots level people, different universities students, university grant commissions, and what I'm seeing from the grassroots level people, they have a lot of economical challenge because of this Russia and Ukraine war. First of all, country like Bangladesh, they have heavily dependency on energy, on Russia and Ukraine. Then the agricultural issues, we have heavily dependency on that. So in that particular issues, I find that our price going very up. All of the things price go very high, and the mass people, they are feeling a lot of trouble in South Asia. And our government trying to solve these things, but it's quite difficult for them to solve these issues because, you know, the small country, the emerging economy, they're heavily depend on G20, developed nation, USA economy and everything. So Russia has to stop this war as early as possible. I think NATO should force to stop this war because this is billions of people life, not only this war in between Ukraine and Russia. And definitely we have to support more to this Ukraine for this particular issue. And second thing, politically, I just want to add, because politically we are in imbalancing situation right now. We have USA, we have Russia, we have China. For a country like Bangladesh, a small country, they are facing a lot of trouble. We have election soon, this coming January and February next year, we have elections. USA, many diplomats, they visit our countries and many more things happening. Now the small country, their economical issues has a problem. Their political improvement or democratical application has challenge. Third, who will be the global leaders for the community? That is the questions. I think the world has too much challenge right now, but I believe you people are knowledgeable, you are experienced, you have ability to raise voice for the global community because you are the global leaders. So you can help the billions of people from emerging economy. You know that South Asia, Africa and South America, we have 54% communities and all of them are young and we are in trouble. We have to work together.
Okay, we're going to now bring in Sasha Starr, who is actually from the Odessa area, who can give us some insight. Also is the host of the TV show, very popular, Ukraine, Russia, and China. What are your thoughts about this movement with Ukraine and NATO and perhaps even the European Union?
Okay, a few things. Number one, let's look at this war from the point of view of Russia, then Ukraine, and then NATO and the United States. Russia. Russia wants to, under Putin, of course, wants to rebuild its empire by taking over control of all its former Soviet Union's territories, including Ukraine, later on Baltic states, and then if everything goes all right, then Poland, Romania, and other East European countries will be the next targets. From Ukrainian point of view, Ukraine is all they want actually is to free their territory from Russian aggressors, uh, become member of NATO and European Union. Actually, I think this October will be next big meeting about Ukraine joining European Union. Finally, NATO and United States. Um, they have their own interest in this conflict, and for time being, it coincides with Ukrainian interests. NATO and US interest is to weaken Russia as much as possible, at least to a degree that for next foreseeable future, say 50, maybe even 100 years, they will never ever start attack against any neighboring country. In this case, of course, NATO and the United States are interested to help Ukraine to achieve their objectives if possible. Maybe it is not possible. Maybe we are underestimating Russian strength, Russian army with all their mistakes and misery and recent upheaval of certain generals and so on. But they still have 4 times as many people as Ukraine. They have still remains of the army, the technology, the weapons, and so on. So to crush Russia is extremely difficult. Although under certain circumstances, Ukraine can achieve its goal and to get rid of the Russian aggressors, at least to get them from its territory. Now, about Ukraine joining NATO, I don't think that we should overestimate the meaning of Article 5 of NATO. And this is exactly why Ukraine wants to become a member of NATO. We already talked about that no country can join NATO while it has territorial disputes, never mind outright war with its neighbor. Let's forget about for a moment about all that. What is Article 5 really is? The perception is that if one of the NATO countries is attacked, all other countries immediately defend this member. But if you read this article, it says something different. For 24 hours, there is a silence. People are analyzing what's actually happened. What kind of attack is against the member of NATO? Is a cyber attack considered to be attack? What about blockade? Let's say if the Baltic states, Russia blockades them from the Baltic Sea, it doesn't enter the territory, but essentially blockade forbid NATO to enter any of these Baltic states, period. So there is no way that NATO can help these Baltic states unless they have figured out that it's to their advantage to attack Russia outright, maybe with the thermonuclear weapons, who knows. But it's very, very difficult to define what exactly is attack against single country, a member of NATO. There are, after 24 hours of silence, there are consultations. The country, by the way, the country which is attacked has a right to defend itself. Go figure out how Estonia or any other Baltic country can defend themselves against Russia. I fail to see that happen. David, please, you wanted to interject.
Yeah, let me just say, we have to keep in mind that NATO is a mutual defense treaty. Article 5 talks about that if one country is attacked, then the other countries will come to the defense. It's not offense, it's defense. Okay?
Okay.
There's absolutely no question, by any reasonable definition of an attack, Russia is guilty of an attack on Ukraine.
But Ukraine is not applied. Article 5 to Ukraine doesn't apply. So I wouldn't compare that. Yes, of course, in this case, if Ukraine would be member of NATO, all other NATO countries would defend it. I agree with that.
Right.
But there could be much more hybrid attacks, certain actions which look like an attack, but probably is not an attack.
And your point is well taken that there are all kinds of attacks that occur, including cyber attacks, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay? And it's debatable about whether or not that would be covered, which is why the 24-hour rule. But in the case of Ukraine, the reason that Article 5 is an obstacle is there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They have to Russia. Therefore, if Ukraine was to become a member of NATO and there was not a carve out for Article 5, then the other countries of NATO, including the United States, would be obligated. That doesn't mean that they have to attack Russia, but it means that they have to do more than they're doing now. And I think realistically, it would mean some commitment of troops.
We haven't heard from Miss Kim.
We've had this conversation before, and I've said when we've talked about, okay, it doesn't want to go nuclear, we don't want to see America or its allies, boots on the ground. What's the point of Ukraine joining NATO if they're going to get a carve out for Article 5? Clearly that's not the case with Finland or Sweden, who's remained neutral all these years. Denmark, I think, is another one where their memberships have been rushed through this year and last year. If we're going to say NATO membership should be available to Ukraine, why would we do that and then not defend them? What's the purpose of that? And just on that note, we also know that there's a number of countries around the world that are continuing to do trade with Russia to their benefit, because we've seen a mass exodus of very wealthy people in Russia who don't want to have be subject to trade restrictions. We know that the United States, approximately 30% of the world economy is currently under sanction by the United States and its allies. Do we run the risk on a geopolitical and worldwide political space? Do we run the risk of alienating Russia and giving them the opportunity to make alliances with countries that are hostile to us and actually strengthen those relationships? Is that going to be a problem? In the absence of David M. Walker, perhaps Jonathan Lockwood, you could perhaps answer that.
He's throwing the grenade to you, Dr. Lockwood.
You're muted.
You're muted. I think he wants to know about what they call the mutually assured destruction, or the MAD policy.
Well, as I said, the two questions are, do we strengthen Russia by allowing it to continue to build relationships with other countries that we in the West have sanctioned, which is approximately 30% of the world economy? And also, if we're going to contemplate giving the Ukraine NATO membership, doing so whilst excluding Article 5 from that membership, what is the point? Hey, Ukraine, you're a member of NATO. If any of us get attacked, you're expected to contribute to our protection. But if you get attacked, we're not going to contribute. What sort of deal is that?
Well, not a very good one. But one of the things that I've proposed on the Ukraine show several times is that one of the things that, as soon as we get to a point where we have an operational ceasefire or an armistice, one of the things that NATO and the U.S. should do is construct a global ballistic missile defense system designed to neutralize the nuclear arsenals not only of Russia, but also of China, North Korea, or other potential nuclear aggressor nations. The reason I say this is because, based on my research into the Russians' perceptions of U.S. strategy and the factors which influence it, the one thing that has emerged from that research is that the one thing that the Russians fear more than anything else is they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power in their own perception, their nuclear missile arsenal. Gorbachev, back in April 1985, got a report from the KGB on the U.S. SDI system, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And the KGB assessment was that the U.S. would eventually be able to block 90% of Soviet missiles in a first strike, and there was no way that the Soviet Union could keep up with this capability. Now, I ask you, at that time, nobody thought that the U.S. was going to have a capability for blocking 90% of Soviet missiles. The point is, the Russians believed it, and they acted on that belief. And that was that belief which caused them to indulge in expenditures which eventually bankrupted the Soviet Union, attempting to counter what was in effect a phantom SDI program.
Yeah.
So
Let me
what I'm
jump
saying
in 'cause
now,
I've got to go. Okay.
say again,
Look, the bottom line,
Broadcast yourself.
I don't think that Ukraine's going to get in until the and that's
not hearing anything.
I
Yes,
think we're
he's in
experiencing
advance with issues and
technical
everything.
difficulties.
Hey, Nick, I've got a question for Sharif, and if David can get in later on, if he comes back in and everything. But from a standpoint, and Sasha may have some thoughts about this as well, but from a standpoint of the rest of the world, a lot of the rest of the world, in my opinion, is looking at allies, or people that can help them as they are building up. That's why I think that personally Bangladesh and other countries are going toward Russia and some other countries like China that we may see as enemies here in the West and everything, but they are looking at the survival standpoint. So what argument would you give to them to veer away from that? Because I think most of these countries are trying to be developing, they're trying to build up their own infrastructure. So they're going to go to the people that can help them build up their infrastructure the strongest. And if that's going to be Russian oil, or that's going to be a number of other things, they are going to do that. And that's just my opinion, but Sharif may have a different opinion. But what are some of the ways that we can get them out of that mindset, if that's the mindset we want to get them out of? And Sharif, do you think I am correct that y'all are going to countries that are going to help you build up no matter what those countries are, East or West?
I think Dr. Sharif is also frozen up, unfortunately.
Mark, you're scaring all the guests. I
I
scared
know
the last
it's all frozen. Okay, so here's what you do, Mark. When you have the serious, real, tough question, and it's like a grenade, toss it to Dr. Lockwood. He's an expert in this area, so he can help answer how these countries play both sides of the barrel. Dr. Lockwood.
Well, the United States has had to play both sides of this equation simply because we did not really anticipate, we partially, the intel community anticipated the possibility of Russia attacking Ukraine, but they did not anticipate the success that the Ukrainians would have in stopping the Russian attack. They thought if they attacked, that Russia would pretty much easily overrun Ukraine. And when they did not, and the opportunity arose for the U.S. to provide aid, we began incrementally providing aid along with the other Western allies. And now we have the Ukrainians mounting a counteroffensive, which is slowly making progress, not as decisive as they would like, but it is a different situation than we had anticipated prior to the beginning of this war. And so now you have the possibility of Ukraine actually achieving an operational victory, which could make an armistice possible. But again, this all hinges upon the success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive and whether it is able to gain back the lands that it had lost. So now the U.S. also has to weigh in the fact that they have drained their reserves of weapons that they had in peacetime, and it's going to take several years to replace those weapons. And so in case we had to supply more weapons, we would eventually have to go with lower quality weapons rather than the top of the line technology that we've been supplying up to this point. So yes, the U.S. has to be cautious and play both sides of this, mainly because it did not anticipate the current situation.
Jonathan, just a comment about one thing. Today in the morning, I've heard the General Wesley Clark commented on Ukrainian offensive against Russia. What he said is that Ukrainians are being expected to start offensive against Russian army, one of the strongest in the world, without not even superiority in the air, but without any air force, period. He said that it would be a crime expecting United States start of one of its attacks in a past or probably in the future just as well, without first achieving air superiority. So in fact, US and NATO are not allowing Ukraine to get not any superiority in there, even parity in the air. Effectively, what they're saying is, okay, you want to learn how to jump in a swimming pool? Please go ahead. Here is a swimming pool. Yeah, it's true, there is no water, but you still learn how to jump. And once you will learn, then we will give you a water in the swimming pool. So what they're saying is, okay, the F-16s will be available and will fly into Ukrainian airspace, say around February, March next year. But you still continue your attack. You attack, and there are 200,000 square kilometers are being mined. Already 20% of all Leopards that were transferred to Ukraine, they've been destroyed. So by negotiating about the sending the Leopards and then later on Abrams tanks, they get several months, 6 to 9 months, a lead time to Russian army to prepare for these tanks, and Russian prepared all their weapons to neutralize and even destroy these tanks. Same thing will happen with this F-16s. Don't you understand that by giving Russia a year time to prepare, so Russians will prepare 10,000 of their stupid MiG-29, MiG-23, MiG-21, their inferior planes to F-16s. Of course, by the sheer number, 10,000 against 100, they will destroy all those F-16s in a matter of few days. So what's the point to do these delays and make that fits actually only in one consideration. US doesn't want Russia badly to lose this war. They want to keep balance of power. Here is Ukraine, here is F-16s, Russia. Ukraine will get F-16s. Get ready for that. Okay, Russia, are you ready? Ukraine, here is F-16s. Go ahead, attack, and so on. This is so-called funny war, which was in 1940 between Britain, France, and Germany. That's what it reminds me.
It sounds like that and everything.
I
Dr.
think-
Sharif
I
said
gotta
he did.
I think
For
there's
a
a
second,
valid
Dr. Sharif said he
about
didn't
the
get to
weakening.
my question and
Mark,
everything.
Mark, I was waiting. I think there's a valid point about the weakening of US military supplies and its allies' military supplies. But I just want to bring the question back to what I asked before about the economic impacts of this. If Russia is under sanction and 30% of the current world's economy is also under sanction, what is our long-term economic plan here? Because we run the risk that if we just simply cut off Russia from trade with our countries, that they're going to form alliances with, for example, we talk about the BRICS, they're going to form alliances with other countries. Is there going to be an economic repercussion for us if we don't make plans for how to address Russia and those other countries that are perhaps hostile to us, and the weakening of military supplies? What do we do in Taiwan? So there's some real issues here that are past just the military intervention in these regions.
Shaquille, Russia was a very active member of BRICS well before the war with Ukraine started. Russia works for several years with China, but together with other BRICS countries, to undermine US dollar, which is the cornerstone of US power and dominant position in the world. So what is changing now as the war of Ukraine is progressing in attitude of Russia? Absolutely nothing.
That's not
Russia
well,
is
that's not the
hostile
point
to
that
everybody.
that's not the point that I'm making, Sasha. What I'm saying is, long term, let's say that we are able to be successful in military intervention, economically speaking, which is intertwined with politics, which is eventually intertwined with military action. Economically speaking, over the long term, if we don't do trade with Russia and if we force them out of the Western economy, not only will they increase trade with BRICS nations, but potentially they'll increase trade with other nations. And it is something that we really need to know. 30% of the world's economy is currently under sanction. So there is a massive percentage of the world's population and a very large percentage of countries that currently have some level of animosity or hostility towards us in the West. What economically is our plan here? That's something that
What
we've
are you
not really
proposing,
talked about.
Shaquille? What's your proposal then?
I'm not. I didn't make a proposal. I asked a question. What
No,
is
No,
the
no,
plan?
what is his plan?
Hold on a second. Shaquille and Tasha, that actually alludes to the question that I was asking, and I'll rephrase the question now. I was asking Sharif, because Sharif is in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is definitely reaching out to, as he just mentioned earlier, get Russian oil and get other oil from countries that they are trying to build up their economy. They are a developing country and all in that space. So, from the perspective of somebody that is here in a lot of these countries, because I think some of his students are from Brazil. He's definitely in Bangladesh. What is their, for lack of a better term, end game and everything, and how are they going to achieve that? Because it does seem to me that that is the elephant in the room, is how the third world countries and the second world countries are, one, seeing the war, and I'd love to hear Sharice's thoughts about this, as how they are seeing the war between Russia and Ukraine, and
Okay.
also what they are seeing as their global mission or their global goal and everything. So, Sharif, you're an educator. So, what is your thoughts about, one, the war, and second, how the war is impacting your country's development? Because I do know from being on your show several times that you are trying to encourage growth in that part of the world. So, what is your take on that and everything?
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Martley. Not only in Dhaka or Bangladesh, beside that, India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan. These are the reason we are very active. Our World Talent Economy Forum, and you know that we develop some largest business incubation with the support of university grant commissions. It's huge. Many young people they are involving. I say that we are in trouble. Definitely, country like Bangladesh or Pakistan or India, everybody in trouble because of this war. Economical trouble because everybody has to live. Then now price go very high. Second things, energy. Energy is a massive problem for everyone. So what I'm doing in my business incubation, you know that I'm general chair for Nikola Tesla Technologies, and we are bringing Nikola Tesla innovations and everything in Bangladesh. So with the help of the local ecosystem, we have many talented people with some engineering universities, and with the help of ADB and World Bank, we are developing different alternative solutions for survive. It's energy solutions we are developing based on Tesla innovations. We are innovating different kind of things based on social innovation. You know, Dr. Mohammed Yunus, he's a Nobel laureate and he win Nobel Prize for microfinance. So country like Bangladesh, our major economical strength actually grassroots level people and the microfinance. I know that all of you have a very good understanding about that. So we are integrating all of the modern technology, microfinance initiative, and we are trying to overcome from this situation. I cannot save whole country; it's very big issues. But according to our World Talent Economy Forum initiative, what the business incubation responsibility we are taking, we get a very good success. And our entrepreneur, I want to say social entrepreneurs, even though in this economical challenging situation, they are in survival conditions. So my plan, I want to develop 15,000 entrepreneurs in emerging economy. We are getting a lot of support from around the world. I want to give thanks to everyone, even Mr. Homestoner. I think we get this network from Port TV. He visit Bangladesh with his friends. He go to Prime Minister office. He go to different university. He visit economic zone. So things is that, look, the developed nations, the big country, they have opportunities to solve many complex problems around the world, and they can make business. This is not a problem. But with the help of war, by killing people and making all of the noise and creating problem around the world, how they are doing these things. Especially, I want to say Russia doing desperately wrong things. I think this is right time. All of the people from around the world, we should stop this kind of initiative, and we have to protect ourselves, and we have to find out who will be the global leaders. What is the role of the global leaders? I do not find the global leaders has empathy, sympathy, and good leaderships is a major problem right now. That's why for my student, I'm training themselves how to be a good leaders. In Singapore, I'm training themselves how to be a good leaders. So let's see how
And,
we can
and
work
Sharif,
together.
Sharif, I will say to you, obviously, I'm the president of the Pacific Rim Chamber of Commerce. Holmes is the chairman of that Chamber of Commerce and the Pacific Rim Pacific Rim Business Council. We do spend a lot of our time dealing with developing countries and trying to promote trade, trying to promote entrepreneurship. And I think that when we come in, we're able to assist by dealing with government leaders. As you said, Holmes spoke to the Prime Minister. I've spoken to presidents in Africa. And this is a really important thing that we do, is to try to encourage there to be more trade, encourage there to be great development and entrepreneurship in those developing countries. It's something that we love being a part of. But it is unfortunate there are some processes in developing countries which holds them back. We try to provide as best as we can some Western knowledge and economic knowledge to try to improve those conditions. So that's something that I hope we're able to continue to do in your region.
Well, I got to.
I have a proposal.
Let me just add a couple of minutes here, 2 minutes
Okay,
before I head out. But I think this has been a very interesting discussion, and for me, I think what's very confusing is that I think Shaquille Latimer has actually brought up some very legitimate points, and I think that there are a lot of I think a lot of this is going to be determined on what happens in the next year with the presidential elections in the U.S. Because I can tell you what's interesting is that even though the Democratic Party of the U.S. has always been not so strong on foreign policy, one of the reasons that Joe Biden says he wants to run again, when he was asked about Fareed Zakaria, by that question in an interview, the president said, well, the world is very disrupted. There's a lot of authoritarian leaders, and we have to fight for democracy, and we're committed to Ukraine. It's right now 70% of Democrats are in favor of that position. Here's the deal. 80% of the Republicans, whether it's Trump or DeSantis as a nominee, are against that. They're saying we don't need to spend these billions of dollars in Ukraine. We need to worry about his home. So what's ironic is in the U.S., the Republican Party is leaning more towards focus on domestic issues and more of an isolationist policy. And I think that this is actually something that the world must look at. The final point I'll make is that I think the guy that's watching this very closely, who's trying to play both sides of the fence, is the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. And, think about it. China's now at 0% inflation. They're not growing. I think Modi knows it. And he's trying to slowly position himself to be the number one economy in the world. And John Chambers, when he was in the United States with the Prime Minister, said that he predicted the next 5 years, India would become the number one economy in the world. So I think it's important for the U.S. to work a deal with India to say, look, let's give you alternate sources of energy so you move away from having Russia as an ally, because you can't be friends with Russia as they're killing Ukrainians and friends of the United States of America. But that's just my 2 cents. But make no mistake, Modi is getting very aggressive. And I agree with John Chambers. I think in the next 5 years, India will be the number one economy in the world. I think Modi is trying to make India a major superpower. And I think that's good for South Asia. Maybe it's not. But I think that's the elephant in the room that we're not talking about.
Steve, can I just say to you, and I don't want to debate politics, but let me just say to you, you might find this surprising, but I'll actually come to Democrats' defense here. When it comes to Democrats and their foreign relations policies and what is perceived as sometimes being weak, I don't actually think that's the case. And I also think that people around the world, and especially people in America, pay way too much attention to which political party is going to be in the executive. The people that are in charge of military and intelligence, and I'm sure that Dr. Lockwood will say to you, these people are patriots that are dedicated to their country, they're dedicated to world stability. The advice that they give to presidents is impartial. They don't give advice along partisan lines. So I think that there's a lot of fluff that happens in election cycles where they tell people what they want to hear. But ultimately, I don't think that America will weaken itself either under either Democrats or Republicans for the sake of politics. I don't think that'll be the case. In relation to India, I'm sure Dr. Sharif will tell you that whilst, yes, they have the potential to have enormous growth and be one of the world's greatest economies, there is so much bureaucracy over there, and there's enormous challenges that they have at the moment between minority Muslims and Christians versus the majority Hindus. And that has been a situation that has been inflamed in recent years. I think that India needs to be very careful how it proceeds. And I think that the United States ought to be very careful, and the West ought to be very careful in coming into that nation and empowering one side over the other.
Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. And I'll end with this. The former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, just on CNN yesterday, that he supported U.S. policy towards Ukraine, whether it was Trump or DeSantis or Biden in the White House, that he would actually say that the U.S. is doing the right thing. And this was someone that was an ally of Trump. So I think it's, maybe you're right, but I'm just saying the reality is would the U.S. shift the policy?
Well, okay, but you say he's an ally of Trump, but international politics gets a lot more murky. He was an ally of Trump because of domestic policies in the UK in relation to Brexit, but he was never really on the conservative Tory side of politics. He was not very well liked. So that's why I'm saying you have to be very careful when it comes to international issues of putting in there how we all feel domestically about our own countries, because I think that there's some significant challenges that happens in international politics which the people in charge, regardless of their political persuasion, will take into consideration. Jacoby, you've had your hand up for a while. Over to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll agree that, well, two things, because I want to get back to the other point, the economic impact point, because I think that's where the broad and best part of the discussion is. I will say that neither party will intentionally weaken defense. It's based on who gets placed there, and I agree that the lifelong individuals are the ones that, yes, will try and give the best data and the best non-partisan feedback, but there are partisan individuals that get placed in the heads of these positions that do give partisan information, and that's where we run into where it's not intentional, it's an unintentional weakening based on whatever political leanings that individual at that head spot gives. And being in isolationist policies and being the way our politics is now, that 80% that Steve talked about, many of those have been pro-Putin as well, which is sad that is the mindset of some within that party at this moment, but it just is. And I just hope that we're able to move past that. But to get back to the actual the economic impact point, let me get my question out about the economic impact, because I think that's where you brought up a great point, and I think that's where our focus should be.
It'll take me 5 seconds just to say this. In relation to what you just said about I would have finished already. I would have already finished. Let me just say this. In relation to military people being put there because of partisan things, remember that both sides of politics get their military advisors, the Speaker of the House, the Leader of the Senate, etc. So there's political things on both sides. I do trust the military to be impartial with their advice.
We're not going to get into the political debate because we completely disagree on that point. But again, not completely disagree, I won't say that. But to get back to the economic endpoint where we can all agree on that's where the focus should be. Russia pulled out of that grain deal. I don't know if that was discussed earlier. And I would love to hear from Sharif and Lockwood, Dr. Lockwood and Sharif, about that economic impact based around just grain alone, because I just read a short article from NPR where Turkey is trying to patchwork a deal to help with Russia pulling out of that Ukraine grain deal. So how can, I guess what we had all talked about playing both sides, Dr. Lockwood, how can, for example, I think Turkey is going to now have to play both sides, both with Russia and Ukraine, to help with that economic impact as wheat prices surge. Same thing with Sharif in developing nations. How will this really impact those developing nations? Because we all need food.
Well, for one thing, the U.S. is being one of the largest food exporters in the world as well. One of the things that the U.S. could do, and it's not clear because it impacts other issues as well, is, for example, the U.S. right now uses about 40% of its corn crop. Now, get this, corn crop to produce ethanol, which it puts into its gas tanks for it to consume as fuel, which, according to the climate change activists, that exacerbates the global warming problem. Well, this puts the global warming activists and others in a rather odious position, because if the U.S. wanted to alleviate or contribute to feeding more people around the world and alleviate the supply problem, they would stop using 40% of their corn crop and instead use that corn crop for food exports, which would greatly alleviate in a significant way food prices on the global market. Now, it's not the same thing as wheat, but it's certainly a contributor. Go ahead.
Sorry, how would they transport the food? If they don't use the corn for fuel, how are they going to transport the food? What fuel are they going to use to transport the food with?
Yeah, that would be the interesting point. What would be the fuel that they would use to transport that food out to the global market? Right now, the viable alternative for the United States would be using liquid natural gas, which is less carbon, a lower carbon footprint, shall we say, than the other fossil fuels. But then again, this all depends on whether you really believe that human industrial activity is actually contributing to global warming, and that too is debatable, because astronomers have recently pointed out that the temperature on other planets during this same period has also been going up, and there is no human activity on those planets. So what they're saying is, it's the sun, stupid. It's not human industrial activity that's contributing to global warming. It's other factors. So this issue is much more complex than even we perceive at the moment. So
I hear you and everything. Hey, Toby, could you redirect that to Sharif as well? Because I heard it and I don't want to redirect it since it's your question and everything. But I think that I would love to hear the view from the development world.
Okay. Thank you. My view is very clear. People have lot of talents. People lives is very important. This war actually creating a bad example for global economy and for all of the peoples. We should stop in anyhow this war. We should stop Russia, and we do not want politics. We do not want more investment in military industries or the arms industries. USA should stop this kind of investment. They may solve many unique problems around the world. In between 3 hours of journey, I get around 2.5 billion people in South Asia. 2 months ago, I attend in the Delhi, in the Prime Minister Office conference for entrepreneurs. 5,000 entrepreneurs from around the world, they come and they plan in between 25 years, they will produce $32 trillion economy. So it's possible. So why we focusing on all of the war, the policy, this and that? Better, I think the USA citizen, USA people, North American like Canadian people or G20 people, they should more focus on developing nations. It has a young people, it has a lot of problem, and we need your help. We can work together. Let's solve the problem. Be creative, be positive, and be a good leader. And another things I want to add, because for my development purpose, I go to USA, I go to Britain, I go to Oxford, Cambridge, MIT for my development purpose. But I never see some good leaders from developed world. They come to Bangladesh for learning microfinance or for learning Islamic finance or for learning leadership. That creates empathy. That creates understanding about the real culture. We should learn from each other. So that's why I'm developing a largest business incubations. I want to invite you all. I'm sure you will be impressed by our infrastructure, impressed by the talent. That's why I'm focusing on talent. Talent is important. We have to help people, and people will change this world. And we should stop all of the political people, those who do not have leadership quality like Putin. Thank you.
Sharif, I'd be happy to
Pretty cool.
the councils in Dubai because I think that they would be, they're full of people from different countries that have come to Dubai and have made it and they've gone back to their own countries. So I'd be very happy to introduce you to some of the business council leaders that we deal with in Dubai and the UAE more generally.
I have to agree with you, Dr. Sharif. Yeah. In other words, it'd be nice to do something positive, Dr. Sharif, rather than fight a stupid war in Ukraine. That's like ridiculous.
We have a lot of things. You can build a good university. You can build a good school. You can help our media, right?
Yeah.
You can promote our country to the global area. You can solve energy problem, agricultural problem, water problem, housing problem. Many things is undone. At least I can say every day I'm visiting. So I can say a lot of good things happening. People are brilliant. People are talented. They only need good leadership. But how come all of the stupid people become leader? I'm sorry about that. How Putin become leader? If you see his background, he don't have empathy. How a spy? How he has empathy? He don't have. So we have to rethink about the leadership problem. We have to rethink about the leadership approach. This is important. The university has to do more research. They have to welcome all of the brilliant people. And you can come to my university. I'm sure you can get a lot of interesting case study, lot of interesting history, and you can change the world. You can part of these communities. And people gonna respect you. History gonna remember you. That is the beauty of emerging economy.
The leadership problem in Russia, the only one country that can solve it, it's Ukraine. That's the only way to solve the leadership problem in Russia. Just get rid of him, get him killed, get him out of power. And Ukrainian now announced, read the General Zaluzhny article in Washington Post just the last couple of days. He is saying that he's going to take over Crimea and defeat Russians with or without help from NATO. That's his goal, and Ukrainian army. Now, Ukraine, by the way, started to produce its own weapons, certain the missiles, and it going on, and more weapons Ukrainian will produce, and nobody will tell Ukraine you can use these weapons on Russian territory, or you cannot use this, or you can use here and you can use there, but you cannot use over there. It's the same thing that when Germany attacked France and France was trying to resist, somebody would tell France, well, you can attack Germans, only those who invaded your territory, but never ever even think attacking Germans on their own territory. You're never allowed to do that. That's what Ukraine now is faced with. Okay, you can kill Russians. Yesterday, 620 Russians were killed on Ukrainian territory. Small number, but it adds up every day. More and more and more Russians are being killed. And this is the goal of Ukrainian army today, to kill as many Russians as possible on its territory. It's a goal. It's not. Now they attack Crimean Bridge. Now Ukrainians are not hiding because remember several months ago they denied.
Dr. Sharif, I think you see, Sasha is illustrating the essence of the problem here, in that in Russia and Ukraine, you have two nations who are locked in a death struggle, and they cannot possibly care less about global economic development or the needs of other countries. They are locked in on each other.
And with that, we're going to lock ourselves out. We want to thank our international panelists and thank the Honorable David M. Walker for Economics Monday, our very important topic on Ukraine and NATO. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.